altruistic, selfless people in our community. What I believe we lack is institutionalizing radical caring. In other words, that our institutions that we build are intentional, that their charter, their goal, their vision, their intended outcome are clear, and that the communities that they produce are intentional communities. That they are not communities that are de facto. When we ask many people, what community do you belong to? People will say, I belong to this community or to that community. But through listening campaigns that we have done, we found that often people just say that as a de facto response. It's not that they necessarily feel a true membership in the community, and that is often because the communities that have been built often out of necessity and often given the circumstances that a particular time represents. But when we talk about being compassionate, we have to understand that the forces that are working against our compassion, against our true Adamic nature, against our prophetic nature, are multi-billion-dollar institutions. This is not a fundraiser, alhamdulillah, so no one needs to be worried. We can talk frankly. You know, often we only talk about this when we have fundraisers, and this is not a fundraiser at all. Someone said alhamdulillah. So that's not why I'm saying that. I'm saying it because we forget that the media that is distracting our children, the media that is distracting others in our community, including ourselves, those operations are not running off of shoestring budgets. They're multi-billion-dollar operations that are intentionally wanting to make us the consumers that we're intended to be, where we end up buying things with money that we don't have, that we don't need to impress people that we don't know, to try to make us those type of consumers. Those are multi-billion-dollar institutions. Also, the forces that are at work to distract Muslims from the core of their faith are multi-billion-dollar, very intentional institutions. I'd invite you to Google search later, not now, later, the Southwest Baptist Seminary's program, the master's degree program on converting Muslims to Christianity. It's a master's degree, not in interfaith relations, not in Islamic studies. It's a master's degree specifically in converting Muslims to Christianity. Master's degree program. And if you look up the curriculum, you'd be really surprised. The level of Islamic literacy that these folks are expected to have is much higher than many of our own graduates in some of our programs, because they're very intentional and very serious about what they're doing. But we as individuals, we love and we care, and we talk about this today, Juma, that we have these caring hearts, but we have to think about institutionalizing this idea of radical care. When we look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his love and his care and his concern for the people, and we should be clear here that when we say the people, that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam receives a message, who were the Muslims in Arabia? And by extension, who were the Muslims in the world? Were there Muslims in Indonesia? Were there Muslims in West Africa? Were there Muslims in the subcontinent? Were there Muslims in Medina? When the Prophet receives a revelation, there's no Muslims except him. And then Bibi Khadija and Bibi Fatima and Imam Ali and all of the great people from his community who ended up embracing Islam. But they're in a time where the people were human beings, who are not yet Muslim. So they were then faced with reconciling themselves as a community against what is now a non-Muslim community. And if you think about some of the things that Allah talks about in the Quran, about the idea of radical caring that the Prophet ﷺ had, it's enough to just kind of make us move beyond all of this topical dancing around the idea of compassion that we often do. فَلَعَلَكَ بَاخِيٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ. Perhaps you are, O Muhammad, بَاخِيٌ نَفْسَكَ. And I'm going to translate that in a second. Because they haven't believed in this message. Look up any Arabic dictionary and just look up the three letters ba-kha-a. Bakha'a. Bakha'a in Arabic means literally to kill yourself out of grief. Bakha'a means literally suicidal grief. That you care so much, that you're so concerned that you are going to die out of the level of compassion or grief that you're experiencing. Who is asking this to the Prophet? God. Does Allah know the state of the Prophet ﷺ's heart? Of course. Why is Allah then asking him And when the Arabs say la'alla, they say it for one of two reasons. Either they hope that that thing is going to happen, or they fear that that thing is going to happen. If you say to someone, la'alaka bi khayr, perhaps you are well, that means you hope that they're well. If you say la'alaka marid, perhaps you were ill, inshallah, it means that you're afraid that they're ill, not that you hope that they're ill. When Allah says to the Prophet ﷺ, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِيُّ نَفْسَكَ, perhaps you are, O Muhammad, in a state of near suicidal grief that they haven't believed in this message. What does that mean? That means that Allah knows that the Prophet cares so much about those people that his heart is nearly going to burst out of love and concern for them. Which raises a really important question. Who were they and how were they treating him? Ooh, it gets awkward now. Because the Muslim says, you know, every time I go to the airport, I'm randomly selected. Randomly selected. It's a random selection. You know, I have to take my shoes off, or, you know, people frown at me, or people, whatever. You know, unfortunately, the Sikh community is suffering more than the Muslim community when it comes to hate crimes. Seriously. You saw the poor man yesterday, or the day before, who was accosted and hospitalized, being beaten. You know, subhanAllah. I just thought about a really interesting story with a taxi driver. If you remember me to tell you about the taxi driver, just remember Sikh and taxi driver. I'll tell you about that later. So the Muslim says, what? I'm experiencing this Islamophobia. People hate me. People dislike me. People look down on us. Really, a few really interesting things to think about that. Number one, the Pew Research said that 80+% of Americans polled said they had never met a Muslim. 60+% of Americans polled said that they had negative sentiments about Islam and the Muslims. But people polled who met so few as one Muslim, that number went from 60 to 20-something%. Meaning that the one Muslim that they meet that actually identifies as a Muslim can literally shift the paradigm. And the ironic part is people don't realize, they say they never met a Muslim, they say, yeah, you do, he was just operating on your heart, you just didn't know he was a Muslim. Which is a whole other conversation. So Muslims we're being frowned upon. It's stressful, you know, you get picked on. It's real, it's a problem. And our youth, we should be really clear, are often the greatest victims in that regard. Even the federal government admits, and we've heard this from officials in the Civil Rights Department of the federal government, that the highest group of people bullied nationwide are Muslim and South Asian youth. The most likely person to get bullied are Muslim and South Asian youth, being bullied. And when we think about bullying, and we think about the pain that happens, we should know that that's not just something you say, well, toughen up, you know, just have thick skin. If you think that, read about the young boy, the 11-year-old young boy from the Virgin Islands who's being bullied at school. And he comes home and tells his mom, they're picking on me, they're calling me virgin because he's from the Virgin Islands. So the mom writes to school and asks the principal to address it. They try to do something, the kid's grades are dropping. Finally, his grades are picking up. One day he comes home, drops off his report card, his grades have come up. He goes upstairs, his mom prepares dinner. She calls him down for dinner, he doesn't answer. An 11-year-old boy hung himself in the closet, committed suicide because of being a victim of bullying. And you think about, talk about the way these young children are suffering. May Allah make it easy for them. As you talk about compassion, these are one of the areas of compassion we need to think about. But the Prophet ﷺ was going through every type of abuse you could think of. They had casted that on him. Verbal abuse, they said all kinds of really foul things about the Prophet. Smear campaigns, they had those as well. But the difference is they didn't have, I won't name drop, but they didn't have the pundits and the certain news outlets and other organizations that are now available. When they wanted to do a smear campaign, what did they do? They sent a poet. They said you have to send a poet to go write bad things about the Prophet. And Hassan ibn Thabit, who was not yet Muslim, but he is the poet laureate of his age, the Quraysh come to him and say, we want you to go to Muhammad, نُرِيدُكَ أَن تَصِفَ لَنَا مُحَمَّدًا وَصْفًا يَلِيقُ بِبُغْضِنَا لَهُ. We want you to go to Muhammad and describe him in a way that fits how much we hate him. Go see him and then come back and say really bad things about him. So Hassan goes and visits the Prophet. He's not a Muslim. He comes back and said, okay, what did you see? He said, لَمَّا نَظَرْتُ إِلَى أَنْوَارِهِ سَطَعَتْ. When I looked at his face, and this is why there's a different type of kufr. This is a different type of kufr. What they disbelieved in was very clear. Yeah? He said, لَمَّا نَظَرْتُ إِلَى أَنْوَارِهِ سَطَعَتْ. When I looked at his lights, they shined brightly off his face. وَضَعْتُ مِنْ خِيفَتِي كَفَيْ عَلَى بَصَرِي. I covered my eyes with my palms. خَوْفًا عَلَى بَصَرِي مِنْ حُسْنِ صُورَتِهِ فَلَسْتُ أَنْظُرُهُ إِلَّا عَلَى قَدْرِهِ. I covered my eyes out of fear that I would go blind from the beauty of his image, so I could only look at him according to my feeble ability. The Quraysh said, you remember your assignment, right? He said, we told you to describe him in a way that fit how much we hated him. Hassan said, this is what I saw, and it's blameworthy for a person to tell a lie. So this is what he saw. But they wanted to do smear campaigns. Physical abuse. The Prophet ﷺ undergoes physical abuse. His companions undergo physical abuse. The blockade that was put on him and his tribe ended up causing the death of Bibi Khadija, radiallahu anha. May Allah be well pleased with her. And then, eventually, military campaigns. And when he's at Uhud, think about this. Now you've migrated from Medina. You've lost companions. They've sent the armies after you. They've already said everything they said, and now there's actual war, and you and your companions are defending yourself. Imagine this. This is real. It really happened. And so he's at the battle, and his face is bleeding, and he's wiping the blood. And they said, Ya Rasulullah, why are you wiping the blood? He said, I'm afraid that my blood would hit the ground, and if my blood hit the ground, Allah would wipe them off the face of the earth, and I'm afraid for them. So you're actually concerned with the people who are fighting against you? You're worried for the well-being of the very people who've abused you? You are thinking about the safety of the people who've harmed you. That's a very radical form of caring. And in one narration in Sahih Muslim, he says, Allahumma ighfir li qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. Oh Allah, forgive my people because they do not know what they are doing. So that's one thing, that the Prophet underwent the type of abuse that he had, and he still manifested that level of caring. The other thing for us to think about is the historical context of America and what it means to be Muslim in America. And in that regard, 9/11 was a very important reminder. There are some people who didn't believe or understand or realize or admit or accept that they were people of color until September 12th, 2001. They woke up on September 12th and they said, the Fair and Lovely is not working. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We're not white. I mean, we have to do something. We have to address our presence here in America because people are now asking questions. So what do? We open up our homes. We open up our masajid. We have open houses. And the numbers of people embracing Islam increases after 9/11. And Muslims say, well, that's just because it was in the news. No, it's because Muslims woke up. And they said, we have to reach out. We have to talk to our neighbors. We better do something because our safety depends on it. And when we forget the historical context we're living in, that is when we are going to have a very hard time being communities of compassion. My father, who's an African American, who was born in Oklahoma and migrated to California in 1942, so he saw the civil rights experience firsthand. You know, when I embraced Islam in 1996, not long thereafter, he said to me, who are you going to vote for? I said, I'm not going to vote, I'm a Muslim. And he looked at me like, child? And I didn't realize until Obama was elected that when my father was 18, 19 years old, he wasn't able to vote. Very different America. We forget that. And he said to me, you Muslims should be glad that you can take your hats off. I said, what do you mean? He said, black people can't change the color of their skin. In other words, what I'm saying here is that there have been people negotiating their place at the table in America, struggling for their safety in America from the very beginning, from the very establishment of this country. Muslims, if we think that we're going to be here in this country and we have some type of exclusive right to be here and that we don't have to meaningfully, critically, and lovingly engage our neighbors, then we're in for a very, very rude awakening. May Allah be gentle with us. So we have to think about the historical context that we're in. When we talk about communities of compassion, we have to also remember that the main place that compassion manifests and the main place that it is tested is in our home. It's easy to be compassionate at the masjid in front of everybody or at a Muslim event. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. MashaAllah, MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Oh, it's human. Oh, it's okay. It's mercy, rahmah, alhamdulillah, it's okay. And then you go home and you better not let the chai be 1 minute late. You better not let the chai be. You better not let the flowers not make it home on Friday night. Whatever it is. Because then our compassion is tested. Or you better not, oh you young Muslim, have struggles with your faith, have critical questions. You better not be challenged in your Islam, because if you manifest any level of weakness in your faith, we're going to give you a really, really hard time. A lady came up to me and she said, I need your advice about my son. I said, tell me more. She said, his cousins are atheists. He hangs out with them, and now he's been affected by them. And he's beginning to have doubts about his faith. I said, tell me more. She said, well, I don't know what to do. It's, he's not coming around. And I said to her, my honest advice is that you show him loving kindness, that you hold him in compassion, that you hear about what his concerns are, and that you show him, the beauty of our faith by way of... She said to me, oh, so you think I was wrong when I called him a kafir this morning? And, yeah, I think that was the wrong answer, right? But we see this is what Muslim kids go through. It's all or nothing. There's a very interesting idea in psychology that Erickson talks about, the psychosocial moratorium, that youth have to have a period in their life where they're able to make some mistakes and not be held to account by the society. That's a problem for Muslims because we have this idea of taklif, and that when you're mature, you're legally, morally responsible. But nonetheless, our youth are navigating things that we have never even imagined before. I wasn't always Muslim, and so I can talk about these at least as theoretic things that I dealt with before Islam. When people were interested in someone from the opposite sex, Johnny wants to date Sally, so Johnny says, Sally, I want to date you. Sally says, here's my number. So then Johnny has to call Sally's house, and Mr. Abu Sally answers the phone. Hello? Good evening. Who's this? Johnny. Good evening, Abu Sally. How are you? Who's this? John. May I speak to Sally? No, you can't speak to Sally. Get out of here. Click. And that was the end of that. Because John knew that if he wanted to talk to Sally, he had to go through Abu Sally. Now, it's all in the palm of their hands. John and Sally know one another through their profile pics, through their Snapchat, through the hashtag ability of their love, better than you could ever imagine. Abu Sally is not even part of the conversation. So when we talk about modesty, when we talk about sexual ethics, when we talk about chastity, we have to realize that our youth, and as they say in the church, at every level, there's a new devil. At every level, there's a new devil. And guess what? At the level we're in, Shaitan has become, he's diversified. Diversified his approach of how he's going to distract us all. May Allah be gentle with us. So we have to have communities of compassion. I'll end with a few more ideas. One of them is the idea of the goats that Aesop talks about in his fables. I'm sure you've all read Aesop's fables. He tells the story of the goat herder who goes out and he has his goats, his troop of goats that he goes out and they're grazing. And there's a bunch of wild goats that come and begin grazing with his goats. And so he says, well, I'm going to take them back to the stable with me. So he lets them graze with him and he takes them back to the stable. And so when he gets back to the stable, he begins giving the new goats, the wild goats, better treatment than the old ones. So he's giving them more food and taking better care of them. And one day he opens the stable to let them go out and all graze together. And the new goats run away. And he says, you rascals, why are you running away? And the goats look back at him and they say, we know that we're going to be old goats soon. And you treated us better when we were new goats. And you gave us extra food. But now, we're running away because we're not going to wait around to become your old goats. And I'm telling that story because one of the most fascinating things for our community as Muslims in America is the fact that people are still converting to Islam. Some of you may take it for granted, but as a convert to Islam, I find it absolutely miraculous that anybody is still converting to Islam. And my only explanation, I can give you all kind of, sociological critique. My only explanation is, it's God's religion. Because if it wasn't, there wouldn't be anybody converting to Islam today. We don't have very much good press. I don't know if we're all watching the same movie, but I don't think we have very much good press. You know, go Google search Islam. Google search Islam. Think about what's out there. Turn on the news. How many Muslim countries in complete insane instability? It's not, you can't even tell heads from tails in the geopolitical situation with Muslims. And people, day after day, continuing to embrace Islam. And we see this. I don't know how many you see here, but we see dozens and dozens of people. We have a database of nearly 1,000 people who have embraced Islam in the last decade. And these are people from all kinds of diverse backgrounds. But what's happening now, and again, my only explanation is that it's Allah's religion, is that because our community has begun to think about compassion, inclusivity, cultural relevance, emotional intelligence, and other really important ideas, because we begin to think about that and employ those as best practices, people are now themselves wanting to bring their families with them as they come to embrace Islam. We had a lady came to me, she said, listen, I want to take my shahada, but I want to wait till June such and such. I said, okay. I said, why? She said, because I want my family to be there. I said, well, you know, usually, kind of, if you believe it, you should just say it. Because you know Muslims, mashallah, love to rush people to the shahada. One time, there was a brother interested in Islam, and the brothers found out about it, which is like you always have to kind of keep them, you know, keep them at bay. Brother says to the other brother, he said, you have to become Muslim tonight. He said, why? He said, because you could die in your sleep, man. He said, one time, brother was playing basketball, and he jumped up to slam dunk, and he died in midair. That could be you, Akid. So sometimes, you know, Muslims, mashallah, they love to rush people into Islam. So I said to her, well, do you believe God is one? She said, yes. I said, you believe Muhammad is a prophet? She said, yes. I said, okay, well, you're Muslim. You're Muslim, right? She said, I'm Muslim. I said, but you want to wait till your formal shahada too. And she said, okay, so we scheduled it. Very strange. This is 2 years ago. Her brother-in-law was an anti-terrorism specialist in Homeland Security. Her father's in the Air Force. Her brother's in the Navy. All of these. And they drove from San Diego to San Francisco, 8 hours, 3 carloads deep, come in suited and booted with flowers and balloons to celebrate her shahada. And I thought to myself, subhanAllah, what is Allah doing? Because when I came to say my shahada, it was all about raging against the machine and fighting the power. I would never have thought about telling my parents I was going to convert to Islam. That wouldn't be revolutionary enough. You know? It's too soft, you know? And so, since then, we've begun to see that people are bringing their families. This young man named John Ropolos, he's now a student at Zaytuna College. When he said his shahada, he said, you know, I'd like to say my shahada Sunday night. We said, no problem. He came to the program. I said, would you like to do it before the class or after? He said, after. And all of his friends are with him, hippies with long hair and all this stuff. And then, after the class was over, I said, John, you ready to say your shahada? So I'm waiting for my mother. I said, okay, well, we'll wait a few minutes for your mother. We waited a few minutes. Mom doesn't come. I said, John, are you ready or do you want? He said, well, I'm waiting for my mother. I said, do you want to wait for her? He said, well, she waited 9 months for me. I think I can wait a couple of months for her. Wow. And the women were like, because he redeemed the brothers, mashallah, and say, alhamdulillah. Because the women were like, you know, see, guys. So then mom comes through, and she walks through the door that the men typically walk through. She walked through. Nobody tackled her. Nobody, you know, made a scene. She came, and she sat next to her son. And she sat next to her son, and she held his hand while he said his shahada. And she's crying and he's crying. And I'm trying not to cry because I'm in front of my whole community. He's crying and she's crying. And then after his shahada, she gave a talk. And she said, I want to thank you for making a space for me and for allowing for me to be part of this process. It's going to be a process for our community. Please keep us in your prayers. And ever since then, I've begun to see that people are bringing their families with them to embrace Islam. But we have to be very careful that as we welcome, celebrate, and invest in those parts of our community, we don't treat them like new goats. We don't treat them like new goats, and I hope you all are understanding my metaphor. Because when you treat them like new goats, mashallah, you get the joy of being a new brother or new sister for a few months, maybe a couple of years, and then eventually you kind of fall by the wayside. And you're nothing more than an old goat at that point. So think a little bit about the the goat metaphor when we talk about our community. This idea of radical caring and this idea of being loving enough and compassionate enough and caring enough to actually see the people in our community as the great treasure that they are. Every single person in our community matters. And we can't be communities of compassion if we only care about certain echelons of the community. Or we only care about people based off of their socioeconomic status, or based off of their net worth, or based off of their ethnicity. We cannot be communities of compassion if those are the things that matter to us. What matters to us is who people are. What matters to us is the fact that they are people. When there was a black woman in the community of the Prophet ﷺ, and she's described in the hadith as the black lady who used to sweep the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ. And that's all we know about her. Some of the scholars of hadith actually think it may have been a male. And that's only relevant to highlight the fact that we don't even know her name. Some of them may have argued that she was actually male, but the dominant opinion is that it was a Saudat, the black lady that used to sweep the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ. Why is she important? She's important because she passed away. And when the Prophet asked about her, he said, "Where is so-and-so?" They said, "She died, O Messenger of Allah." And they told the Prophet that they wrapped her, washed her, wrapped her, and prayed upon her and buried her. And the Prophet said, "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me that she passed away? I would have prayed upon her myself." And in this regard, I want to leave you with just some practical things to think about when we talk about communities of compassion. We have to be intelligent enough to use the technology that we've been given for good. When we want to have an engagement, we want to have a party, we want to have, whatever, a social event, we use our cell phones and we use our text messaging, our WhatsApp and everything else for what we use it for. Why is it that there are people in our community who are alone in the hospital and nobody knows about it? Why is it that there are people who are alone in the hospital? We say, we're all busy. Why is it that there are people in our community who aren't enjoying basic necessities that we enjoy and appreciate, but we're not hearing about it? There was a brother who called me. He said, "You should really check in on so-and-so." I said, "Why?" He said, "His water got cut off." So I called his brother and said, "How you doing?" He said, "I'm fine." I said, "I heard your water got cut off." He said, "Yeah." I said, "How long has it been cut off for?" I'm thinking 8 hours, 12 hours a day. He said 6 months. This is in San Francisco. I said, 6 months? He said, "Yeah, 6 months." I said, "What do you mean? How are you living?" He said, "I just go downstairs and fill up a 5-gallon bucket for my neighbors and just bring it upstairs." I said, "Your water's been cut off for 6 months." They said, "Why didn't you tell me something?" I didn't want to bother you. We don't want to be the people who are too busy to help someone get the water turned back on. And the refugees that we're getting ready to support and to help are just the latest and most recent opportunity and blessing for us to be able to help. And in this regard, what does the Prophet ﷺ say? Indeed, there are certain people, human beings, that Allah has distinguished with blessings. يُقِرُّهُمْ فِيهَا مَا بَذَلُوهَا. He will keep those blessings with those people as long as they share them. فَإِذَا مَنَعُوهَا. But when they refuse to share them, نَزَعَهَا. He will swiftly remove them from them and He will give them to other people. So when we think about our privilege, when I think about my privilege, when you think about your privilege, where do we say we got it from? From our hard work. Our hard work is from Allah, which means that our privilege is from Allah. And the blessings that we enjoy, Allah is keeping them with us for us to help other people. So we don't want to be the people who are too busy to help the person whose water got cut off, because that's radical caring. Personally going and helping the person. There was a young man I met here tonight, Zain, and when I heard his name, it reminded me of a story. And that's the only reason I'm calling you out, Zain. You didn't do anything wrong. Don't worry. When I heard his name, I was reminded of a story of a man named Zain. But this Zain was the great-grandson of the Prophet ﷺ. His name was Ali Zain al-Abidin. Ali Zain al-Abidin, the son of Imam al-Hussein radiallahu anhu. He was an important person for a number of reasons, but I'll only tell one story because I know it's late and we want to leave time for you to interject. When he passed away, he had black indentations on his cheeks. He had what looked like extra tear ducts in his cheeks. And they said he also had a black bruise on his back. And when they washed his body, they came to his servant and they said to him, we know why he had these indentations on his cheeks. Because he used to weep so much, used to cry so much, that literally the tears made indentations on his cheeks. He wasn't crying about who won or lost the World Cup. He wasn't crying about the stock market. He might have cried if he knew Donald Trump was doing as well as he is in the That's a whole other conversation. He was crying because of his standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he used to weep so much that he had indentations in his cheeks. They said, we know what that's from, but what is this bruise on his back? And his servant said, every night when the people of Medina would go to sleep, he would load his back up with charity. He would put sadaqah on his back and carry it around to the people of Medina. On his own back. This is the great-grandson of the Prophet ﷺ. And so they said to the servant, Wayhaka, lima lam tahmilhu anhu. Woe unto you, what is wrong with you? Why didn't you carry it for him? He said, I would try to carry it every night on his behalf, and he would say to me, Lin tahmilu dhunubi anni yawm al-qiyamah. And he would say to me, you're not going to carry my sins for me on the day of judgment. And he refused to let him carry it for him. And the point of the story is this. There were over 200 families in Medina who were being personally supported by the Imam that did not know that he was their patron until he passed away, because once he passed away, the support stopped coming. But before he passed away, they didn't even know where it was coming from. Didn't even know where it was coming from. And I'll end with one story. A teacher of my teacher, and I'm only saying this so that you know that this is a person who's from our time, someone I met and personally knew. A man came to him one day and he said, I'd like to speak to you privately. He said, speak freely. So-and-so who's sitting there is my son. He said, I have a gift for you. He said, what is it? And he brought 2 bags of money. I don't know what they call them. Those big, like burlap sacks that they put rice or those type of things in, you know, the big, that they roll them down in the market. 2 bags full of money. It was 1 million Saudi riyals. And this was in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe 90s, which is 375,000 US dollars. He said that this is for you. He said, I have no need of it, jazakallah. I don't need it, may Allah reward you. Which is, again, where do they make people like that anymore? I don't actually need it. People say, well, I don't really need it, but you know, we'll find something to do with it, right? He said, he said, I don't need it. Thank you very much. He said, it's a gift. Do whatever you want with it. It's just a gift. So he said, I accept your gift, jazakallah khair. He walked out. He said to his student, who was my teacher, he said, call the driver. Immediately, call the driver. He called the driver. He put the money in his trunk. And he drove around the city they lived in. And in the course of an afternoon, gave every single bit of it away. Between Dhuhr and just before Maghrib. Gave every single dollar in the bag away. And my teacher, who was running, giving the money, he said he would stop at a house and say, there's a widow here. Go give her such and such. Then they stop at another house and say, there's some orphans here. Go give them such and such. The point of the story is this. He knew where they lived. And my teacher said he took me to neighborhoods that I didn't know existed. And this is part of what we forget. There are neighborhoods that we don't know exist. And there are realities in those neighborhoods that we don't know exist. Because it's out of sight, out of mind. And then he comes back into his musalla and he takes the 2 bags empty of the money and he says, Allahumma fashhad, and dropped them. He said, Allah be my witness, and let them go. That was an afternoon. I'm only telling that story for us to believe that radical caring and radical compassion is still an option today. It's still an option today. And it's not just about money. One of the most precious things you can give people is time. The average American parent spends 18 minutes of quality time with their child per week. 18 minutes of quality time per week. And many of us just said, oh, those stupid Americans. Stupid Americans. Not me. I'm a Muslim. I got news for you. We're included in that statistic. I have another piece of news for you. We're Americans as well. 18 minutes of quality time. You want to do something in terms of building a community of compassion? Spend some quality time with your child. quality time with your child. Quality time means you actually are listening to one another, that you're there. I want to stop and leave time for you to interject, correct, push back, ask questions, clarify anything else you'd like to do. My prayer before closing is that Allah, through His grace and through His generosity, makes us instruments in His hand through which compassion comes about in our communities, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us vehicles of mercy and compassion, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And I pray that Allah adorn me and adorn you with that description of His Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who was described as وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. We did not send you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to all of the worlds. May Allah make us mercies for our families, for our neighbors, for our communities, and for the world, Ya Rabbil Alameen. إِنَّهُ وَلِيُّ ذَلِكَ الْقَادِرُ عَلَيْهِ. Sallallahu alayhi Sayyidina Muhammad wa alayhi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Please feel free to ask any questions.
You were going to tell us about the taxi and the seat.
Taxi driver. So my legal name is Whitney Canon. I didn't change my name legally. Given the fact that my Arabic name is Usama, that's probably a good thing. So I come out of the airport and the taxi driver picks me up under Mr. Canon. So I get in the car and we're driving from the airport, and within the next half hour I basically became his life coach and counselor. I said he should have paid me, not me paid him. We get halfway to my house and he says, I want to open up a KFC in the hood, and I want to make a bunch of money. And he says, I want to do this, I want to do that, and he's a South Asian boy. And then I said, what's your name? He said, such and such, sing. I knew he was from a Sikh family, so listening to him. And then he says, but my father, he said, my father's impossible. I said, well, tell me. He said, oh, my father doesn't understand. He's from a different culture. He doesn't understand America. He doesn't understand my dreams, my aspirations, and so on and so forth. So I said, man, you gotta be patient with your father. You gotta talk to him, listen, so on and so forth. And then he says, yeah, but my dad's a Sikh. Do you know what a Sikh is? And I'm just kind of humoring him through the rearview mirror. I'm like, tell me more. And it was just after the Milwaukee, they attack on the temple there. He said, they attacked it happened on the temple? I said, yeah. He said, those people said they were the turbans. And I knew Guru Nanak. I knew the whole thing. I could have told him. But I was just listening. He says, you know why they attacked that temple, right? And I was like, no, why? He said, because they thought we were Muslims. And I'm like, this is going to get really awkward. And so he says, so I got a piece of advice here. I said, tell me what? He says, never trust a Muslim. And I was like, this is getting really awkward. He says, never trust a Muslim, right? I said, why? He said, because they believe that in order to get into paradise, you have to kill somebody to get into paradise, to kill a non-Muslim to get into paradise. So I'm just kind of like listening. He says, jihad is part of the religion, and the Quran's an evil book. And so for the next 20 minutes, he's just disparaging Islam and the Muslim, right? And I'm just listening, kind of, I'm used to it because being my complexion, I grew up hearing white people talk about black people my whole life. And they didn't know. I just let them talk and wait till they meet someone else who, Anyways, so I'm just kind of listening to him talk about Islam and the Muslims and thinking, what's the best possible response to this? I had plenty of time to think about it. So I thought, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to text my wife and tell her, honey, come outside with your hijab on, and just be waiting at the curb. But I didn't do that because I thought it was a little bit malicious. So I waited, we pulled up to the house, come, pay him, give him an extra big tip. I said to him, I said, listen, man. I said, remember the whole conversation we're having about Muslims? Yeah, he goes, I want to tell you a little secret. He goes, what? I said, I'm a Muslim. He was like, oh, you. He goes, no. I said, no, listen. I don't know where you heard all that stuff from, but it's not true. You should go study, understand. That's not true. I'm a convert to Islam. I studied Islam. None of the things you said are true. And I understand, there's tension in communities, but that stuff's not true. But I said, more importantly, go visit your dad, man. Go visit your dad, man. You need to make things right with your father, man. Take care of yourself. Give him a hug. He's like, okay, Mr. Canon. Anyways, random story. I don't even remember why that came up. Any questions, comments? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Very much needed in this time. My only concern is that sometimes we Muslims, we take comfort in knowing that so many people are converting to Islam every day. But I know, and as you do, that there's thousands of Muslims who are becoming passive Muslims or converting out of Islam every day.
Yeah.
Because there are oppressive interpretations, of Islam around the world, and it's demonstrated well. And when they seek answers, they are told by a great many religious scholars and leaders that it is not their job to